Today, we are talking about the great portrait artist, Arnold Newman. Now, Newman was actually a commercial photographer. He worked for many Fortune 500 companies with their annual reports, other kinds of items. But he became very well known for doing environmental portraits, portraits where the surroundings would say something about the person being portrayed. This picture, this is the artist Pierre Mondrian. Now, this is a great example of environmental portrait. It's not just a picture of a person, but the person in his surroundings. In this case, his studio. Mondrian was a great avant-garde painter. So Newman goes into his studio, and there's some color patches back on the wall. And then he uses his easel. Easel, of course, part of a painter's tools. But here he uses it for the structure of the photograph. Notice how he lines up the easel with the color patches up here, so they become a continuation of that. And then it adds to the graphic composition of the portrait. Then you have Mondrian, really nice lighting. Remember, everything involved in a regular photograph is also part of a photographic portrait. So lighting is very important, that nice side light that's coming onto him there. And then gesture, the way he has his hand draped over the edge of the easel there. It's another interesting part of this portrait. Another artist, Milton Avery. Now in this picture, notice how the chair really fits into the painting. I wouldn't be surprised if he made this painting at Newman's direction so that it would be part of the photograph here. I mean, the edge here actually looks like it's going up and over to make sure it doesn't hit the ball on the end of the rocking chair here. Comes up, leaves a space for him and his head there. Again, very nice lighting, nice shading on his face there. And one of a few Newman's not environmental portraits. This is a studio portrait. No real environment, just a little bit of gray backdrop of what you can see behind the artist Pablo Picasso. Very nice close-up. Mentioned the various different aspects that you can see in a portrait, clothing, gesture, very little clothing here, but even that little bit you see, the sweater there, the sweatshirt, says something about kind of a casualness. Again, very nice lighting, the detail, that gesture of his hand up to his forehead there, actually kind of wrinkling the skin of his forehead is a nice part of this. The violinist, Itzhak Perlman. Extreme close-up, but in this case, the violin serves as environment. Not only does the violin, say something about his avocation, his work, but also it's a nice graphic element of the picture. You got the vertical neck and strings of the violin, and then at an angle, the bow, and then his hands, interesting gesture where he's holding up the violin and bow there, and then the expression of Perlman there. Calder, great mobile artist. So here, Newman photographs him with one of his creations back behind him. The artist George Braque. Braque, a contemporary of Picasso, although I never did get quite as famous as Picasso. Sometimes, one issue I have sometimes with Newman is his compositions get so studied that they're kind of overstudied, overmade. In this case, Braque's head is almost like just another one of the statues, the props that he's using in his artwork here. There's the TV journalist Edward R. Murrow, one of the first television journalists when television started to become popular after World War II. He was a television journalist, so here he is in a television studio with some directors and cameras in back of him there. And if the George Braque portrait was a little overstudied, I love this picture. This is a picture of the artist Max Ernst in his apartment I mean, great environment here. I mean, various artworks he's collected back behind himself there. An absolutely incredible chair. And then Ernst himself, we talked about gesture, the one arm is holding the other, the left arm with the cigarette, and then the cloud of smoke swirling around his head almost becomes an extension of his hair. Now, portraits don't have to be neutral. You could be very flattering or favorable to somebody, or you can do a hatchet job on them. This is Alfred Krupp. Newman got a commission to go and photograph Krupp. Let me give you a little background on Krupp. Krupp was one of the people who supplied weapons to the Third Reich, to Nazi Germany during World War II. His factories made airplanes and bombs and munitions that helped the Nazis take over Europe. While he was doing this, he often used slave labor during the war. After Germany was defeated, Krupp, along with other Nazis, were put on trial, and all his assets were taken away from him, and he was put into Spandau prison, locked up for, I forget how long, something like 20, 25 years was the original sentence. Funny thing happened, though. About 3-4 years later, well, Germany was not doing so well. The economic recovery they were hoping with the new government wasn't going that great. And the powers that be went to Krupp, and they told him that if he would help get the economy going, not only would they free him from prison, but they would return all his assets to him. So after serving a minimal amount of time, he was back out making lots of money and being very well off. Newman did not like this. So when he made this portrait of Krupp, what he did was he found a really grimy looking part of his factory and then sat him down, and look what he did with the lighting. Instead of putting nice flattering light from the front and maybe a little higher, to create some nice lighting effects on him, he put 2 lights behind him on either side. So look what the light does. It wraps around from behind him, and it leaves his forehead, his eyes, the bridge of his nose, his mouth, looking really dark. Combine that with his the way he's leaning forward with his fingers crossed, and well, he kind of looks like the devil. He looks downright evil. I heard later that Krupp actually tried to sue him for defamation of character, which I think is really interesting. He never said anything bad about Krupp, but just the photograph itself, Krupp thought was an attack on his character.